So I didn't grow up on a farm or anything, but I really love the atmosphere of a farm. Something about the cornfields, the red barn. I find it all very cozy and relaxing, but especially because I associate it with spooky horror stories, with ghost stories, witches, slashers, all kinds of things like that. I find the farm setting is so perfect for isolating characters and really feeling like you've taken them back in time to a simpler time and less resources to deal with things that go bump in the night. So today I'm going to give you 10 recommendations for my favorite farmland horror movies, ranked from my least favorite all the way to my very favorite of all time. How's it going, my friends? Welcome again to the Cobweb channel. My name is Daniel. So at number 10, we've got Children of the Corn from 1984. Of course, based on the classic Stephen King story. This is the story of a couple who are driving through an incredibly rural area, find themselves stranded in a small town where they find out the kids have murdered all of the adults and are now being led in a cult by the sinister Malachi. So do I think this is a great movie? Do I love it? No, but I do think it's absolutely quintessential for farmland horror. I mean, when you see the cornfields, you just imagine those creepy kids are out there somewhere putting people up on Scarecrow's stalks and performing horrible rituals for the thing that walks behind the rose, which is some kind of a frightening deity that they worship in this. I don't think it's a great movie. The first time I watched it, I actually really didn't like it. I rewatched it leading up to this list, and I liked it a little more. I think I just really appreciated the atmosphere. I liked the performances a little more, especially from a young Linda Hamilton, actually the same year that she did The Terminator, and it's really cool to see Sarah Connor. It's too bad she couldn't bring more of her Sarah Connor skills into killing off these kids, though. And to be honest with you, I haven't seen any of the sequels, but I do appreciate this movie, and it's absolutely quintessential farmland horror. At number 9, we've got Dark Night of the Scarecrow from 1981. So this is actually a made-for-TV movie about an intellectually disabled man who's falsely accused of attacking a young girl. He disguises himself as a scarecrow and hides in the cornfield, only to be hunted down and shot by 4 vigilante men carrying out misguided frontier justice. Now, it's proven that they were wrong for what they did, but they still end up getting acquitted by the court, and then they find themselves being stalked and killed by a scarecrow one by one. When it comes to farmland horror, one of the top things I imagine is a scarecrow coming to life to stalk and kill people. Man, I just love the visual of a frightening scarecrow. It's just one of the coolest, creepiest things ever. And this movie, it's great for being a farmland horror movie. It's got that small town, rural atmosphere so great. And the Scarecrow has a great look to it, but you're not actually going to get to see the Scarecrow move around a lot. It's almost more of a Final Destination kind of kills that the Scarecrow just makes happen through his ghostly presence. I also think the movie suffers a little bit for not really having a protagonist. The characters that we follow are these vigilante, horrible guys, and we just see them killed off one by one. So other than the Scarecrow itself, there's not a lot for you to root for beyond just bad people getting their just desserts. But this is still one of the best TV horror movies out there. It's got that atmosphere. It's got a really intriguing story, despite the fact that there isn't really a great character to follow through it. And Scarecrow horror is absolutely essential to farmland horror. And this is our Scarecrow pick of the list. At number 8, we're going to go with a classic Hollywood film, The Red House from 1947. So this film is about a teenage girl who lives on a farm with a man and his sister who adopted her when she was orphaned and raised her as their own. But it turns out the brother is hiding a disturbing secret at a red house out in the woods. And because of this, he says that the woods are cursed and no one should ever go in there or explore that red house. The boy the young girl has a crush on starts working for them and becomes more and more intrigued about that red house, and the two of them start investigating. So of all the movies on the list, this is the one that's the least horror. I think you could easily classify this more as a dark drama than a horror film, but it's definitely got those elements. It's got Edward G. Robinson, who is the star, as this older man who has adopted the girl, talking about the cursed woods. When the boy first goes into the woods, it's very creepy. You almost hear screaming and eerie wailing of the winds. It's a great, scary atmosphere. And the movie is just a good, dark mystery where you're trying to figure out what's going on with this red house. What is Edward G. Robinson hiding? Now, pretty much the whole movie takes place on a farm, so it's got that atmosphere. I do think because it's black and white, I have to knock it a little bit. Now, I love black and white films. That's normally never a con for me, but I do think with a farm, you want to see the yellow of the corn stalks, you want to see the red of the barn, the green of the grass. The vibrant colors really add to the look of a farm on screen, and the black and white hinders that. But other than that, this got everything you want out of a farmland movie, and it happens to be an intriguing, dark, spooky mystery at the same time. At number 7, we've got Motel Hell from 1980. Farmer Vincent Smith and his sister Ida run a motel attached to a farm where they capture unsuspecting travelers, bury them alive, fatten them up, and then harvest their bodies as ingredients for his famous brand of smoked meats. So yeah, this is a Texas Chainsaw Massacre style slasher where you've got actually a very nice older farmer who seems like a great guy, but him and his family turn out to be cannibals who are not only eating the people themselves, but selling the people off. Now, I didn't actually put the Texas Chainsaw Massacre on this list because even though it's got like kind of a slaughterhouse kind of a thing, you don't really see much of a farm in that movie, but you definitely do in this one. This is the one that has that farmland atmosphere you're looking for. And Rory Calhoun, who plays Farmer Vincent, is actually fantastic in this movie. He is like likable and lovable, but what he's doing is so horrific at the same time, which adds to a bit of comedy. And actually, Rory Calhoun, when he was much younger, was in The Red House. So we've got 2 movies in a row on this list with that actor. He's actually a really good looking guy back in the day, but I guess he was a good looking guy as an older man because he's also got a romance with a very young woman in this movie who ends up kind of getting brought in on their family and like falls in love with him, which is really such a weird part of this movie. So this movie is atmospheric, it is funny, but it is also gross and disturbing because the look of the people buried alive before they're getting harvested, man, that is some really unsettling stuff. I have this on Scream Factory Blu-ray. This movie's a lot of fun, and if you haven't seen it, I think it's a great time. But we're staying in the 80s for number 6 with Deadly Blessing from 1981. So this movie takes place in farmland where, among some other people, lives a religious cult called the Hittites. One of their former members, who has now gotten married to a non-Hittite woman, dies in a mysterious accident, and his wife Martha, who now lives alone and close to the cult's church, begins to fear for her life and the lives of her visiting friends. So this is a Wes Craven movie, and if I were ranking these movies just off of farmland atmosphere, this might be number 1, or it would be tied with one other movie. This is exactly what you want. Now, while it's not a period piece, the fact that this cult, who's a lot like Amish people, they're not Amish. I think there's actually a line in this movie where one of them says they make the Amish look like swingers, but they definitely have that look. So they make you feel like you're watching truly a movie from another time where just some modern people are clashing with this cult. They are such scary antagonists in this movie, and you hate them so much. Ernest Borgnine plays their leader, and he's so great in this movie. He's so unsettling. And there's such a mystery going on of what's going on with a variety of kills in this movie, of deaths. Are the Hittites killing people, or is there something else going on? Is there perhaps an incubus, which is some kind of demonic presence that the Hittites are constantly scared about in this movie? There's a lot to like about this movie beyond the phenomenal atmosphere. A lot of characters you can get on board with, including Sharon Stone. This was actually a really early role for her. And one of the main character's other friends who actually starts a relationship with one of the young Hittite men, who's actually young Clark Kent in the 1978 Superman. And the movie ends with not one, but 2 absolutely insane twists. And actually, I didn't know what to think about those twists when I first saw this movie. It really threw me off. I've really come around to appreciate just how bonkers the end of this movie is. At number 5 is actually a 1-2 punch of Ty West's X and Pearl. So if you haven't heard about these movies, they came out a couple of years ago, and X was an announced slasher movie from A24, but nobody knew that Pearl was coming, especially not just a few months later. After X ended, they showed a surprise teaser for a prequel, Pearl, and like I said, it came out just a few months later. So it was an awesome time to be a horror fan. I saw both of these in the theater and I loved them so much. And they both take place on a farm, although you're getting very different atmosphere between the two. So X, you're getting a rundown, has-been, barely anymore in operation farm where the crew of an adult film rent the place out to come film their film. And all of that is a pretty interesting thing. You don't see a lot of slasher movies that are that explicit and that meta, I think, about the sexuality that's typically in slasher films. Slasher films typically have that to add a little bit more of an exploitation angle, but this movie is very meta about that in that that's literally what the characters are doing. They're trying to make exploitation. Meanwhile, the slasher killings are going on. When I first saw this movie, I didn't know what the slasher was going to be, and it turned out to be pretty interesting that it was this old woman, Pearl, with some very interesting and unique motivations. And then it was just awesome when the prequel came out, Pearl, about that old woman and how she became what she is. And this is the other movie with Deadly Blessing that would be tied for number one if I was just talking about atmosphere, because this is when the farm was fully in operation. And while this is creepy, rundown 70s farm, this is beautiful, classic Hollywood 1940s farm. Lush colors everywhere you look, the most golden corn, the reddest barns. It's just absolutely gorgeous from start to finish. And this movie has like one of the best Scarecrow scenes you will ever see in a movie. This movie doesn't technically have a living Scarecrow, but it's about as close as you can get to that. And it's so just bizarre. Just one of the best Scarecrow scenes of all time. Absolutely love Pearl. It's such an interesting character study about a woman losing her mind and becoming a murderer. These are great movies, but they're also great farmland horror films. At number 4, Color Out of Space from 2020. This is, of course, an adaptation of the classic H.P. Lovecraft story, and it stars Nicolas Cage and Jolie Richardson as parents of a family who decide to move out of the big city, buy a farm out in the country, and grow crops and raise alpacas. Just live that simple farmland lifestyle. So as a farmland horror movie, that's great. Just watching people from the city transition to a simpler way of life. But a meteor crashes in their yard, and the very fabric of reality begins to change all around this meteor. This is a perfect example of exactly what H.P. Lovecraft horror is all about. An unseeable, unexplainable horror that is just changing everything around it, morphing things into monsters, making people insane, changing the very physics of everything. Like, this movie really goes for those H.P. Lovecraft ideas so hardcore, and I love that so much. I love the characters. This movie gets me on their side and to care about them, both the parents and the kids, so quickly, so easily. This is such a creative movie visually and in ideas. I love an H.P. Lovecraft movie, but there are so few movies that really nail what that Lovecraft feel should be, though hard to explain that is. But Color Out of Space is one of the absolute best examples I've ever seen of Lovecraft on screen. Now, probably the top subgenre of horror that's the most associated with farmland is folk horror. And right now we're diving all in on it at number 3 with Blood on Satan's Claw from 1971. So this movie takes place in rural England in the early 18th century and opens up with a farmer out plowing the fields and finds a deformed skull, something inhuman that could be an animal, but he thinks is probably something demonic. Meanwhile, many of the children of the village are going out into the woods, possibly meeting with the devil to worship him and practice witchcraft. Now, I love folk horror, and I love the idea of people out in rural areas a long time ago, long before people were more educated, just looking out into the woods and thinking the devil is out there. The devil is just like this creepy monster who wanders around in the woods and lures weak people or children into the woods to become his followers, to worship him, to do witchcraft. I just love that. I think that stuff is so fun. Now, obviously, like, when people believe that, a lot of bad things were done in those days. But, you know, this is a movie, and this is a movie that posits, yes, that's true. The devil guy is a creepy guy in the woods, and he's going to make you do witchcraft and worship him and do horrible things, and the children are going to become evil. Josh, I just love that. This movie is quintessential. It's exactly what you want for that kind of folk horror, rural period piece kind of feel. The movie feels a lot like a Hammer film. It even shares some actors, but it's not Hammer. It's actually a Tygun film. It's probably my third favorite folk horror film of all time. My number 1 is The Wicker Man, which I didn't put on this list, even though it's all about having good crops for the next harvest season. You don't really see much of actual farms in that movie, but you do in this movie. Just farmland everywhere you look. Most of the characters are farmers. Blood on Satan's Claw is incredible. And this is the 4K that I just recently got from 88 Films. Man, that cover is so cool. And there's the original poster right there. But when you're talking about farmland horror, you've got to talk about aliens making crop circles out in the cornfields. And the best movie about that is M. Night Shyamalan's Shyamalan's Signs from 2002. Signs stars Mel Gibson as an ex-reverend, a farmer who lives on a farm with his 2 kids and his brother, who are dealing with the loss of his wife, her recent passing away. And he finds crop circles were done out in their cornfields, and it turns out everyone starts finding out that aliens have landed on Earth. They are exploring, and there are more and more sightings of aliens just walking among us. I love that this is a traditional alien invasion film like War of the Worlds, but it's from the perspective of people who are just living out in rural America who don't really know what's going on, but start to notice that, yeah, there might actually be aliens really nearby. This is a horror movie that manages to be seriously creepy, holding back the image of the aliens as long as possible in a way that works like almost as well as Jaws. Like when you just see a little bit of the aliens, every time it's so incredibly creepy. But at the same time, it focuses on characters, character relationships, and emotions. This is such an emotional film. Mel Gibson and Joaquin Phoenix and both of these kids, it give incredible performances. You feel for them so much. You just want them to be okay. You want them to love each other and not turn against each other during the extremely high stress situation that they are put under. On a personal note, I hadn't seen this movie since I was a kid, and I didn't quite remember how good it was, even though I did like it back then. But I just recently picked up the Blu-ray, rewatched it, and I feel like an idiot for not rewatching this consistently for the past 20-something years, however long this has been out. I love Signs. I think it's probably my favorite M. Night Shyamalan movie. It is just so heartfelt and sincere. Now, does it go a little bit over the top at the end with trying to prove miracles and signs by just having so many coincidences build up upon each other? Maybe, but from a screenwriting perspective, it's so satisfying seeing every little detail about the movie all come together at the end, sort of like Back to the Future. And the sincere, unabashed emotion of the movie just really gets to me. But my number 1 farmland horror film is Robert Eggers' The Witch from 2015. So in 1630s New England, a couple lead their kids to homestead way out in the middle of nowhere after they are exiled from their village and church for being too hardcore devout religious, even for the Puritans. And come on, that's pretty hardcore.
It's pretty extreme.
Now farming out in the middle of nowhere, their newborn son vanishes and their crops mysteriously fail, and the family turns on one another as they begin to suspect this is the work of a witch. So this is probably my second favorite folk horror film of all time, right behind The Wicker Man. I saw this in theaters in 2015, and at the time, it was the scariest movie I've ever seen. It probably still is. That is a theatrical experience that is burned into my brain. I will never forget the images that this movie showed me, how terrifying the score was. I think this is the scariest musical score of any movie ever made. I love to listen to horror movie scores. I still can't listen to this score just on its own. It is so terrifying. And I also like that the movie takes a hard stance very early on that there's a witch. This is another movie where, like, the Puritans are right. They're not wrong. There is absolutely a witch out in the woods. She is terrifying. You see her briefly. She's so scary. She does steal babies to eat them. She will curse you. And it's really, really scary. And I love all that. I know some people had a hard time understanding the very authentic language that the family does speak. 1630s, Puritan New England. For some reason, I never really had a problem with that. And I just love the historical accuracy of this. Of course, not the actual witchcraft elements, the accuracy of local legends of this time and how people talked, how they lived back in this time period. Robert Eggers, he's said before that he feels like he's less of a creative and more just a historical researcher. And that's how he makes movies, as he just researches like crazy, forms a movie out of it. I love him. He's one of my top working directors. This is a terrifying movie, and it's a great farmland horror film because they're literally just farming from nothing, trying to build crops in the middle of nowhere. That is such a high stakes, high tension situation, even if there isn't a witch, but there is a witch, and that's cool. And the ending is so impactful and so scary. It just like chills me to my bone. The ending, I will never forget how I felt at the end of this movie when I saw it in theaters. So that's my top 10 farmland horror films, ranked from worst to best. Let me know down in the comments below, what are some of your favorite farmland horror movies? And if you want to stick around the channel, check out this playlist down here of a bunch of other horror movie rankings I've done over the years. Love doing videos like this. Thank you so much for watching. Give a subscribe if you haven't yet, a like if you enjoyed this. With all that said, don't forget to enjoy yourself today, have some fun, and I'll see you next time.